A controversial LA law banning protests within 300 feet of private homes is the latest in an ongoing crackdown on youth-led movements across the country. I'm Yoonj Kim, and this is MTV News Need to Know. On Wednesday, the Los Angeles City Council passed a series of laws restricting the right to protest, including one banning gatherings within 300 feet of private residences. But LA is not alone. In LA, as in many cities, demonstrating outside politicians' homes has been a way for activists to be heard during the pandemic. During the last year and a half, a lot of government buildings shuttered, and so protesters went straight to the source. In Los Angeles, they spoke out against police brutality, COVID-19, homeless sweeps, and the threat of eviction. Homeless advocacy group K-Town for All tweeted, "The new ordinance does nothing to address the very real threat of right-wing extremist violence in Los Angeles, and instead uses it as a political opportunity to restrict constituents' First Amendment rights." City Council President Neri Martinez, who introduced the ban, said this was to protect lawmakers and not about silencing any voices. It came after anti-vaccine protesters banged on her windows and doors and harassed her neighbors this summer. But legal experts say that the existing 100-foot ban should suffice if observed. Activists and human rights advocates are concerned that this extended ban will have a chilling effect on free speech and invite conflicts with law enforcement. The LAPD has a history of mass arrests, racial bias, and misuse of force, and according to the Brennan Center for Justice, there are increasing ties between police officers and far-right militia groups. Though the LA ban is not GOP-sponsored, it comes amidst a national wave of Republican anti-protest laws across the country. Former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich pointed out, here's a reminder that the political party crying about the death of free speech has introduced 81 anti-protest bills in 34 states, including a law in Oklahoma protecting drivers who run over protesters. In 2021, like he said, 81 bills restricting protests were introduced, and that is more than twice as many anti-protest proposals than any other year, according to Ellie Page, a senior legal advisor at the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. They've been tracking such laws since 2016, noting an uptick in anti-protest bills after young indigenous people led the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock. And last year, as nationwide protests picked up following the murder of George Floyd, mostly Republican legislators were motivated to make organizing more difficult by heightening the legal repercussions. Iowa passed a similar bill granting immunity in some cases to drivers who injure or run over protesters. And Florida Republicans broadened the definition of a riot to include peaceful protest, making it easier for anyone protesting to be charged as a rioter. In response, Sherilyn Ifill tweeted, "The right to protest is as critical to a democracy as the right to vote." Florida Governor DeSantis' effort to criminalize protests was as much a threat to the voter suppression law he signed. The real reason people in power want to suppress protests is because nonviolent activism actually works. According to researcher Erica Chenoweth, in the last 100 years, nonviolent campaigns led to political change 53% of the time worldwide. And it only takes 3.5% of a country's population participating to affect policy. On top of that, nonviolent civil disobedience is more effective than violent confrontation. In 2020, 93% of Black Lives Matter demonstrations were peaceful, and it yielded results. Police reform bills were introduced in 26 states. This fall, folks in Minneapolis can vote to disband the police and replace them with a public safety office. School districts around the country have removed police from their facilities, and public perception of law enforcement has changed forever. This progress shows how powerful we are when we use our voices. That's why we have to protect this right to civil disobedience, because without sustained pressure from protest, political will subsides, and these movements that affect our lives and our future fall apart. I'm Yoonj Kim, and that's what you need to know.